Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we have a special guest that has been with us when we were doing our Carnivore Radio show, Mr. Ken Gronbach. He is an author, a famous demographer, and someone that is very timely. We're so fortunate to have him as a guest, considering what's been going on in our country and around the world. Ken, welcome to Carnivore Radio.
Thank you, my friend. Good to be here.
Excellent. So, a lot of unrest, a lot of social strife, a lot of protesting, and many people, especially some older people, not non-millennials, we'll say, are having trouble coming to grips with all of this. What are some of your insights in what's been transpiring?
You mean in the Black Lives Matter?
Black Lives Matter, yes, Black Lives Matter in particular, yes.
Okay. Well, I've been warning my audiences for the last 10 years that we have a situation here in the United States that's not going to go away. And it's when I speak to an audience, I can speak to 500 business people, and there might be 2 African Americans, 2 Asians, and 1 Latino. And I ask my audiences, I mean, I'm very blunt about it. I said, what is this, honky heaven? Are we living in a white bubble? Or are we pretending that the ethnicity of our country is white? And the answer is it's not. In fact, by 2045, white non-Latinos will be a minority in the United States. A minority. Now, that's going to catch a lot of people by surprise, but that's exactly what's going to happen. We have a situation with the African Americans that is beyond terrible. I mean, it's just a situation where we as a culture have dramatically screwed up. If you look at, let's just take a look at the prison population. The prison population in the United States is about 2 million. There's 1 million African Americans. There's 1 million 500,000 Latinos and 500,000 whites. I mean, so we have 13% of the population is providing half of the criminals.
Is it true?
Bad
Can
people?
I interject one thing? I don't know. I'm asking your insight. I've heard, I don't know if it's true, there's more African Americans in prison than in colleges.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Is that true? Okay.
Sure.
Didn't know that for a fact.
Hands down. Do the African Americans have a point in Black Lives Matter? Yeah, and they've had a point for 100-something years, 200 years. We need to fix this. We absolutely, positively need to fix this. We cannot pretend that this doesn't exist. Let me give you another one. There are. I have a friend who's a PhD from Harvard, and his name is Dr. Nicholas Everstadt. He's a demographer, and he's a demographer for the State Department. He also is very high up in the American Enterprise Institute. And he wrote a book called Men Without Work. Now, Men Without Work is a scary book by itself. And he is saying that between the ages of 25 and 55 in the United States, we have 20 million men who do not work. The total number of people, men, between those ages of 25 to 55 is 60 million. So it's 1/3 of them.
And why is that?
Well, you tell me. One, we have more people in jail. We're 5% of the world's population. 5%. We have more people in jail than any other country in the world, including China. It's including India, with both of those that are about 1.3, 1.4 billion people each. But let me finish the story. Of the 20 million men that are not working and can't work because they're felons and they can't be bonded, insurance companies won't let you hire them. 10 million of them are African American. Now, if you look at the African American population in the United States, which is about 40 million, and you take away the women, now you have a population of about 20 million men. take away the young and the old. The number of African American men between 25 and 55 is about 10 million, so it's all of them. What we have done, Jeff, is wiped out a culture with our system, with the war on drugs. Wiped it out. So it's.
Okay,
do we have a problem here?
Many conservatives point to the Great Society as one of the culprits as well. Shed some light on that. True, not true, somewhere in the middle?
You know, I that's not my thing, and I don't mean to cut you off on that, but you know, I'm a demographer. I know numbers. And I look at numbers and I compare numbers. I know that large numbers of people eat more than small numbers of people. Large numbers of people will commit more crime than small numbers of people. But when it comes down to the reason, the only thing that sticks in my mind is we began this war on drugs 30, 40 years ago, and we haven't let up. And the net result is we have 2 million men in jail. We have 200,000 women in jail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Lopkin, would you like to ask Ken a question?
Yes. I mean, we're talking a lot about the prison populations, but isn't this really just an indicator of a larger problem? I mean, wouldn't fewer people of all races, quite frankly, be in jail if our educational system was handled better? African Americans had better access to education early on. Right now,
hey Jeff. I'm sorry, Jeff. I'm getting so much interference. I can't hear the doctor.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead, doctor. I'll get to a better location.
Right. Isn't the prison population really an indicator of a bigger problem? I mean, wouldn't we have a smaller prison population if we had a better educational system? Right now, educational funding is based on testing. So the worse the test results are, the less funding.
I'm sorry, Jeff, but I can't hear the doctor.
Yeah, Dr. Lopkin, your mic has been breaking up. I don't
Can
know.
you guys hear me okay?
Dr. Lopkin,
we can.
Ken, can you hear him better?
I can't hear him at all.
Can you?
No.
Can you hear him now?
Can't hear him at all.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Try it one more time, Dr. Lopkin.
Can you hear me now?
No, it's breaking up.
Huh. Can you call in again, Dr. Lopkin? No.
Not without canceling the show.
Okay, no problem. No problem. We're just trying to understand what's going on. So you can hear me fine, right, Ken?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, let's do it. Okay,
so Dr. Lopkin had a question about the educational system. Is that a contributing factor to all of this?
Yeah, I'm sure it is. In fact, I'm certain it is. There are certain, it's like chicken and egg. What came first? The African Americans have some serious cultural issues in that they don't marry. Only about 25% of them marry. 75% don't. 75% of the kids that are born into the culture don't have a dad, and that's tragic. And the fact that our educational system is not serving them is certainly a problem. One of the things that I urge my audiences to do is, I said, you really want to make a difference in the United States, hire a felon and get your insurance
but you said
company.
Something that's very important. Why do we do this in terms of, I've always been against, felons are marked for life.
Yeah, they are.
They are. I mean, that you're subjecting someone to a lifetime of crime.
It's a liability beyond measure, and but it's a financial liability, and it seems to be controlled and dictated by the insurance companies, who are not going to cover you with any kind of bonding or insurance if you hire a felon and they commit a crime while they're in your charge. So you can't hire them. Now that has to change. That law has to be addressed. And I guess what my point in this entire matter is we're not addressing the real problems. And I think that's what the doctor was alluding to. There seems to be things that in the genesis of the process that cause that we're now dealing with the symptoms of it, but we haven't gone back and corrected the real problems. And that's what we need to do.
Let's see if we can get Dr. Lopkin back in the conversation.
Okay.
Dr. Lopkin.
All right. Ken, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I want it's like every other word.
Let's try it, Dr. Lopkin.
What I was talking about before is funding for education. Right now, most on test scores. So the worse test scores there are, the less funding they get. Doesn't that guarantee that these schools will fail?
That's a good question. You talks about lower scores, lower funding. That's a catch-22, isn't it, Ken?
Yeah. Listen, we need to do a revamp, and we need to think about this. We need to think about 40 million African Americans. We need to think about 70 million Latinos. We need to think about 5 to 10 million Asians in our country who are all going to be ethnic challenges for us. It's what made our country great, but it's something that needs to be addressed now. And I really believe that education is a real issue. And unfortunately, most African Americans and even Latinos live in inner cities, and in inner cities just historically have bad schools. So it just creates more of a problem.
So it's a perpetuating situation that really never ends. Exactly.
And the evidence of that is, what's going on right now with Black Lives Matter. But let me give you some light at the end of the tunnel. That's not a train coming at us. We have raised in our country a crop of kids, 88 million of them. There's actually 88 million millennial Gen Ys. They were born 1985 to 2004, a 20-year normal generation. The baby boomers who were born 1945 to 1964 were about 78 million. So the millennials are actually 10 million bigger than the baby boomers. Now, wherever the baby boomers went in the continuum of time as they aged, they changed life. They changed the culture. They changed work. They changed play. They changed everything. Millennials are going to do the exact same thing. One of the big changes that we're going to see is we raised these millennials to be good kids, to be nice kids, and to not tolerate bullying. And I think that's what you're seeing.
You see this as a center point in terms of them being conditioned not to put up or not to accept bullying is really at the root of their support of Black Lives Matter and the protests, correct?
Take a look at the population, the critical mass of the protesters, and you'll see that in a lot of cases it's half white. It's the first time in history that you've had that for African American issues. First time. The marches that were done by Martin Luther King, God bless him, but everybody was black. I mean, almost. It might have been 2 or 3% white. But now you're looking at some of these protest groups that are here in the Northeast. I see protesters. Everybody's white, and I'm thinking,
right.
This is wonderful. I mean, it really is. This is a wonderful thing, and
Ken,
we did this based on the way that we raised the kids.
And sorry to interrupt. Hold that thought. We've got to pause for a quick break.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players kept dribbling on it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
What did the buffalo say when he dropped his son off for school? Bye, son.
So take a moment to make your kid laugh, because dad jokes rule. Make your kid laugh today. Go to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
All right,
we're back.
with
And
Carnivore
do you want to be
Radio.
part of the conversation? can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693.
Well, Dr. Lopkin, why don't you try to ask Ken another question? Ken, I know it's a little difficult. Usually Dr. Lopkin's equipment is right on, but everyone has one of those days. So, Dr. Lopkin, you are breaking up a bit, but I think we can go forward.
Ken, you were talking about the millennial generation and their belief system, but isn't it true that in 2016, pretty much the millennials decided to stay home from the election and not make a difference?
What do you attribute that? What do you attribute the newfound social activism? If what Dr. Lopkin, I know what he says is correct, they stayed home.
Yeah, I can't give you an answer for that. I know that that's what they did. My sense, though, Jeff, is that is not what's going to happen this year. I think you're going to see them vote en masse. And what's happened just in the 4 years since 2016, we've picked up another 16 million voters that became eligible to vote, and most of them registered liberal, registered Democrat, or unaffiliated. But young people. Go ahead.
What makes you think they're going to come out this time? Because a number of high-ranking officials in the Bernie Sanders campaign have come out and said they expect the millennials to stay home again.
Okay, I'm going to have to guess at what you said. But you're saying they didn't. They're not going to come out because they were Bernie Sanders supporters. But I think what's going to happen is the millennial generation in general, just in general, and of course there are millennials who are Republicans, will come out and vote against Trump. I think that we're going to see that like you cannot believe in mass against Trump.
And do you think the major issue is racial with him?
No, I'm sorry, Jeff. Is what racial?
I'm sorry. Do you think the major issue the millennials have Donald Trump is racially based?
I don't know.
Okay.
I know that they're just anti-Trump, and in large part. I can't give you a percentage, but I think that's what we're going to see.
You think it's enough to tip the election?
Yeah, I really do. I don't think. See, I called the election for Hillary, and had to eat crow. But she. The weird part about it was that she, won the popular vote, but she didn't win the Electoral College, and I would never change that. But you had the numbers of people that were eligible to vote that didn't even register was an enormous number. I think it was close to 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
It was a huge number. But I think that what we're seeing now, and that what numbers are showing, is that the millennials are registering to vote, and young people tend to be liberal. It's
okay.
So we're going. I think you're going to. Yeah, and in addition to that, in the last 4 years, we have lost about 8 million conservatives who have simply died. So the difference will be this election is just demographically is 24 million votes in favor of the liberals. Now those are just numbers. Those are numbers. They're real. It's going to be interesting. Could something come along that changes that dramatically? Sure, but I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to disagree with the assumption that younger voters are automatically liberal. I've spoken with a lot of Gen Z, which are younger than millennials, and they're actually fed up with what the millennials have done, and they tend to be more conservative.
That could be, but they're not old enough to vote.
No, Gen Z is old enough to vote. Gen Z, you're talking about 21, 22 college graduates already.
No, you're not. Generation Z was born 2005 to 2024, and so they're not. They're like 17 years old and leading edge.
Every description of Gen Z I've seen has being born 1995.
Okay, well, we can move on from that. Okay, but overall, millennials are definitely more, liberal. What do you think of in terms of the statues being ripped down? What is that? What's the genesis of that? Is it the educational system of millennials and younger people maybe being taught that our founding fathers or some of our tradition, it's not what I grew up on?
You're taking me out of my territory here. I really don't know. What I'm assuming that these kids are doing in taking down the statues is finally dealing with the equivalent of NASCAR, showing a Confederate flag. What the heck is that? What are we trying to say here? And so we commemorate these folks and we build bronze statues to them, and their past is dubious. I guess that's what I guess what the millennials are saying is we're just doing what we should have done a long time ago.
That's very interesting. Obviously, we're trying to talk about demographics here, but where do psychographics fall into this? I mean, doesn't that make a difference?
Psychographics?
Yes.
Yeah, psychographics are subjective. So most psychographics, and I run into this from time to time with people who say they're demographers, and what they really are is their specialty is psychographics. Psychographics deals with the personality of the groups. Now, to a degree, I will agree that psychographics are important, but I only deal with demographics and then the most basic psychographics. I don't get into the DNA of it.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Lopkin, another question?
Yeah. So, demographically speaking, how are we split as a country now? And I'll keep talking about the fact, not on this show, but on media in general, that we are a divided country. Can you talk to the demographics of what that divide is?
Yeah.
We seem to be a very much divided country, Ken, and it's more divided than I've ever seen it. Well, I was really, really young in the 60s, but it seems like it's deja vu all over again.
Well, we had a very divided country in the 60s when I experienced the 60s. I wasn't a hippie, but I was certainly with them. What I want you to do, Doctor, is I want you to imagine a Thanksgiving dinner. And at a Thanksgiving dinner, you have young kids, older teenagers, and then some very opinionated 20-year-olds and maybe early 30s. And then you have their parents, who are roughly 35 to 55. And then you have all of the grandparents. Take the parents out of the equation. Send them home. You're going to have opinions with the young people, and you're going to have opinions with the grandparents, and there's no buffer. That's exactly the situation that we had in the 70s, because between the hippies, if you will, and the very staunch conservatives, there was a tiny generation called the silent generation. And the silent generation was born 1925 to 1944. And it was barely 50 million people. And they called them silent because that's exactly what they were. They were silent because of their critical mass. Now what we have in our country is we have a massive number of young people under 35, and it goes all the way down because we have a crop of good Gen Zs as well as Generation Y. But in between them and the boomers is a generation called Generation X, born 1965 to 1984. There were only 69 million of them. It was a diminutive population. It was that population that sucked in all of the Latinos, especially from Mexico, because we needed labor.
Yes.
In addition to that, and the Latinos that populated our country are in, for the most part, that generation, and they're having kids, which is why we're having more kids than ever. So why are we divided? It's because we have big populations for 20 years and then small populations for 20 years. And then we have big populations for 20 years, and they tend to think differently because of their age. Now, that's big picture.
Do you think this divide is going to be a permanent part of our environment because of this demographic divide?
No, I won't. And I'll tell you why. And the hippies are the best example. I mean, what did the hippies want? They wanted sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They wanted,
now they want money.
Now they wanted communal farms. They wanted communism. I mean, and what happened? Well, they grew up and they had to work for a living, and they became Republicans. So it goes away.
Any last question, Dr. Lopkin? Dr. Lopkin?
If you could just clarify, you said, what's the general time frame of generations?
I can't hear him, Jeff.
I think Ken said about 20 years is the general time for generation.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
What we do, I'll tell you, Doctor. What we do is and I've written 4 books on the subject. If you read a newspaper, you'll sometimes find a generation that's 7 years long, or maybe even 13 years long. People make them up. I don't know where they get them. And then some people latch on to a particular set of years. What we have done is we go with a 20-year, a standard 20-year generation, which used to be the time from when you were born to when you could procreate. The boomers, everybody agrees to, for the most part, is either 1945 or 1946 to 1964, and then we just back out of that in both directions.
Mm-hmm. And before we leave, what's your latest books that you've authored?
Okay, it's called Upside: Profiting from the Profound Demographic Shifts Ahead, and you can get that on Amazon. It's called Upside. Just put Amazon, put Upside and demography, and it'll turn up. Or you could go to my website, which is kgcdirect.com, and you could buy it on my website. And I sign it.
I think, Eric, he's been very Ken Gronbach, thanks for being on the show. I think you've been very, very informative. Dr. Lopkin, sometimes technical things happen, and I think, Ken, you went with the flow.
Well, let's do it again.
Didn't he, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes, he did. And I appreciate it.
You're the best.
Thank you very much. And
take care, guys.
I believe that concludes another edition of Carnivore Radio, doesn't Dr. Lopkin?
It does. You can catch it Fridays at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio.
Thank you very much for tuning in.